I think am I coming through okay at the back? If I project, am I killing anyone at the front? Great. So you can hear me okay? You're good. I'm getting a nod. Brilliant. First of all, thank you for spending 30 minutes of your life with me. I really appreciate it. Okay, and the reason I really appreciate it is that a few years ago I was critically ill with cancer, and so the very fact that people want to spend a second of their life on anything that's interesting or anything I can offer, I can't tell you how much I really, really appreciate that. So, this talk's a bit of a new one. I have no idea how long it will last. I'm told I have 30 minutes. Let's hope. It may be less, it may be more. It's more likely more. And just for those of you who have no idea who I am, I'm a motorcyclist is probably the first thing to mention. For many, many years I've been a motorcyclist, and only in recent times have I given up, and I've given up because I have a dog. And the dog just doesn't look great on the back of the bike. And honestly, she'd love it. It's a little French bulldog, she'd absolutely adore it. However, I can't be the person that comes off the bike and then has to say to his daughter, the dog's not with us right now. So it was a choice of the dog or the Harley, and the Harley had to go. But I use this slide really to introduce a little bit of how risk embracing I tend to be in life. In that I did a motorcycle ride to Mount Everest from Kathmandu with 27 other insane people. And it was brilliant. Everyone in my family told me I was nuts to do it. They spent months telling me I was an idiot for doing and planning this. And then I got cancer a few years later, and guess what they all said? We're so glad you did those things. So I mention this mainly because I've been in this industry for an incredibly long time, as the sort of litany of, or the roll call of different companies speaks to. And this is how I tend to view software engineering and software development for anyone thinking of a career in this. This is what we get told it looks like. So in the distance is our goal. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. It's probably on a PowerPoint slide somewhere. Someone is very proud of that picture, but it's a fiction. And then they've got a roadmap to it, right? You see this little road here? It's a brilliant road. It's a lot steeper than it looks. And that goes all the way to that wonderful goal. It's going there, and we're going to take our turns. We're going to be great. Unfortunately, what they don't tell you is that when you get there, not only do you have that view, it's fair, you do usually have a view like that, you also have in the background the world's worst toilet, by far. This is a toilet that can only be used an hour a day. The rest of it, you can't get within about 20 meters of it without deciding you don't need a nose. This is the truth of software engineering, software development in my experience, is that in the background, it's hard work, it's horrible, it's messy. It doesn't stink that bad, but it's pretty difficult stuff. And this talk is actually a bit of a sneaky one. So I'm trying to, particularly anyone considering careers in software engineering, I'm kind of not just giving you the truth of what it can be like at times. I'm going to try and give you some truth around what a skill I had that I had no idea was actually a superpower. So I'm a good engineer. I can write good code. I know what great code looks like. I've had lots of compliments on my code. Some of it even works. But in many respects, this thing I'm going to share with you today is the difference I had in my career. It's the reason I ended up with these incredible companies. It's the reason I created 2 startups and sold them. It's the reason that I adore great products in our space. When I see a great product in it and I know the engineers behind it, it's more than just a product. Okay, quick sales pitch. I've written a bunch of books. That's mainly to tell you I've written a bunch of books. The important thing to note here is don't buy any of them right now because they're hugely expensive for what they are. And many of them are intensely out of date. So ignore the ones at the top left completely. Down the bottom, just to show you I'm not a complete tightwad, I have a copy of it. I shall be giving it out to the best question at the end. All right, so think about your questions, bring your game, and you get punished with one of my books. Okay, so this is a superpower, this thing that I'm going to explain today. And you'd be forgiven for asking the question, what does storytelling have to do with technology? Surely we're scientists. Storytelling doesn't have its place in our science, in our computer science or our software engineering. And I used to think that too. I used to get desperately frustrated with my managers. It was always their fault. When I'd say, I want to do this technique, I want to use this new way of building things, I want to use this new language, I want to use this new technology, I want to use ChatGPT, even though it's an engine of confusion. I want to use these things and bring it to you. And I used to fail all the time because I led with facts. I thought the facts were enough. I thought if I say to you, here's some data that shows how incredible this is for another company, you're going to want to do it. No, turns out not often. Because we have a bit of a fiction that we tell ourselves. We tell ourselves that we're rational. And in my experience, in all the product development I've been involved in, including things like the iPhone, people aren't rational. People are constantly surprising me about how they think and how they operate. And that's good. That's brilliant. Because otherwise, ChatGPT could probably take our job. It isn't going to. Because understanding people is not its forte. Okay, so what does storytelling have to do with tech? I've drafted in my old boss to help us with this. Because he taught me a lot of lessons, not least how to not treat people. But he was an amazing inspiration because he was one of the few people I worked with that could tell a story. And he was very famous for saying it's the storyteller that has the most leverage in most conversations. So it's an unfortunate fact that the facts aren't enough. How good your piece of kit or your product or your service is not good enough. The story you can tell around it can win the game. This made an enormous difference to me when I first went into a room to work with a bunch of people that shall remain nameless. So I'm going to try and anonymize the company. But it's a big logistics firm from Holland. You can probably figure it out. For many, many years, they've been trying to deliver products and change. Right? They were trying to change people's worlds and build these new products to bring into the logistics space. They spent millions every year. And they'd failed every year. They delivered nothing. I mention this to you now because we're all friends. It's not going out of these four walls, is it? I'm watching the video going, I'm dead. But it's a true story, right? This happened. And I was brought in. I was the CEO of a startup. Now, I don't know if anyone here is a CEO, but CEO is a wonderful position because we have no idea what we're doing. We're making it up as we go along. We have strategies. Strategies are our product. And most of those strategies are, at best, something we made up when we were feeling mildly confident, and at worst, something we made up because we copied somebody else and changed the name. So as a CEO, I had to go into a room full of really quite difficult individuals that didn't want to believe me. In fact, it was the stories that helped me through this. This is the individuals I was looking at. They were not happy. It wasn't exactly him. I wouldn't want to meet that one. But I was walking into a room that was populated by this. Non-technical individuals, and I was there to help them with a discrete problem they had, i.e. they've been doing software engineering, they've been building things that no one needed. I came out of that room with a £25 million contract. To put it in scope, my little company was 7 people. We had no way of doing what we just signed up to. We had to learn it as we went, which, by the way, as a CEO is a bad move. But I've been enormously successful in telling a story. I'd gone in there and said, well, I'll explain to you now what I did. I'll explain to you how it worked. The reason it worked, though, the thing I want you to take away is this rational, irrational thing in people's brains. And there's lots and lots of theory on it, lots of neuroscience. The book that helped me understand it was more about marketing than anything else. If you haven't read Switch, grab it. It's a beautiful book. It's very easy reading. It's not too complex. And the lovely thing about it is it has this metaphor it uses for how people's brains work. Now, I got taught one metaphor by someone in the past. And she said that, look, the brain's got a crap filter. And that crap filter doesn't like facts. So you need to get through the crap filter. And you get through the crap filter really easily. You appeal to what matters to the person and the brain. And the way she explained it is that there are only about 3 or 4 things that a brain cares about. Right? It cares, am I going to eat? Am I going to, be eaten, or am I going to procreate? Now, that last one is a difficult sell as a software engineer. But the first two you can kind of appeal to. So one of the things you do when you're building your stories is you appeal to those instincts in someone's brain. And Switch talks about this, but uses a slightly different metaphor. It uses the metaphor of the elephant and the rider. And I love this one because if you've ever been on an elephant, you realize that this is a beautiful example of metaphor making. I did ride on an elephant once. The elephant decided it was going its own darn way. And the rider was desperately trying to make it go the way it was supposed to, and it was hilarious. This elephant was, no, I know a shortcut. We're going home. I'm bored. I'm hungry. And that's how our brain works, all right? You've got a rider with a stick that's going, please stay on the path. Please stay on the path. These people have paid some money. Please stay on the path. And then there's the elephant going, it's just a stick. Doesn't matter to me. Does it appeal to my needs like hunger? No, I'm going to go the way I choose to. So as somebody in technology, your job is to help change happen through the work that you build, the things you engineer. But to make the result of your engineered product, you have to understand that you're convincing people. And that means you're working with the elephant, not always the rider. You can convince the rider of anything. They can be brilliant at the facts, but they still don't control the elephant. Okay. So what is a story? You keep using this word story, what do I really mean by one? And I picked this up from an old friend of mine who writes fiction. I asked him once over a beer, what do you do? And he said, very simply, he said, I lie. I was like, ouch. That's just changed my perspective of every fiction author on the planet. He said, I tell lies. He said, there's an important factor to a good story. It has to have truth at the center. You tell a lie to deliver a truth. And that's kind of the concoction I'm encouraging you to think about. It's markedly different in advertising storytelling. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But in our game, because of what we're trying to achieve with people when we're helping them understand our products and our services and our technologies and the things we've poured our lives into building, we want that to land as well as possible, so we wrap it in sometimes what you could misconstrue to be a lie. I do it sometimes. I told a lie early. I told you a lie about a company that is a Danish company, or no, a Dutch company, a logistics company. That's a lie. All right? It's a different company entirely. But there's a truth in it, and everyone here recognized that truth of years and years of building something and not delivering anything. That's a universal truth in our industry. You've only got to look at the headlines. But I wrap it in a little bit of lie because there's a truth in there I want to land. So that's what we're doing when we're telling stories. And there's lots of mechanics that I'll talk about in a minute about how you can concoct and build your stories. But keep in your mind, it's a lie that tells the truth. That's what we're trying to dream up. The reason we do it, and the reason the lie's okay, is that we are trying to establish common ground with somebody. When you're trying to convince somebody of the value of your product or your service, like I say, something you poured your life into, establishing common ground is really important. And it builds towards, through rapport, into trust. This is actually the same kind of pattern that I use. I'm a Samaritan's listener in Eastbourne, with the Haven in the centre of Eastbourne. When we're on calls and we're taking a call from someone in crisis and they're telling me their story, one of the things we're doing is building common ground, rapport, and mutual trust through confidentiality. That's no worries. That's a harsh critic. But yeah, so that's why truth is important. You can tell, you can get away with a lot of things in the lie, but if you undermine the trust, if you undermine the rapport you're trying to build, then you lose. So that's what we're trying to achieve when we tell these stories. And the reason for that is, and it's going to sound very woolly and very soft skills, which, by the way, are a stupid name for something. Soft skills are as hard a skill as an engineering skill. To anyone, I'm looking at the lovely folks over there chilling out, anyone thinking about getting into engineering in the future, learn soft skills. You're immediately better than everyone else in the team. You can be the best Java coder in the planet, best C# coder, whatever language, JavaScript, whatever you want to fancy doing. You are phenomenal if you know how to listen to people. So I always hate soft skills. I think it's always soft to the side. No, it's absolutely crucial. And when we're telling these stories, we're connecting with people around our products and services, and we're looking to build empathy and compassion. Now, I'll go over a little bit of ground here because sometimes empathy is misunderstood. Sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Sympathy is, say someone's down a hole. That's what the picture here is all about. Someone's down a hole, from Dante's Inferno, by the way. Love that book. Down the bottom of the hole. Sympathy is going, oh, you're down the hole. Never mind, here's some facts about my products and services. All right? Oh, we've connected because I've said, oh. It's a bit like hopes and prayers. Never mind. It has the same element to it. So it's not very helpful to be sympathetic, and it usually is received badly because you're not in the game with them. Empathy is when you're in the game. So the metaphor we use or the example we use in the Samaritans when we're talking about how you build empathy with someone calling is you climb down the hole with them. You sit with them in the hole. You look around at the walls. You look around at their world, what they see. And then you can start to go, oh yeah, this is tough. This hurts. I did that in that room with those people that have been failing. I started my stories in that room with, I get you. I've been here. Let me tell you how many times I've failed at software engineering. Let me tell you how many times, let me confess to you how many times I've seen companies in the same position you're in. And then I usually drop in a little thing that even builds more empathy and compassion because I start to say, well, I've helped people in the past that have had similar problems, but it's not always gone perfectly. So I'm already expectation setting through my stories. Compassion is kind of the active quota of empathy. Compassion says you're going to not just be in the hole with them, but you're going to try to help in some sense. Now, we're limited on Samaritan's Call as to exactly how much we can do. We're not supposed to advise, we definitely don't judge, and it's entirely confidential. But I can honestly say on several calls I can prove I've saved someone's life, and that is compassion that's leading with that. There's nothing better, by the way. Anything I do in tech is nothing compared to volunteering with Samaritans. It's the best thing I do in my week. Okay, and so I mentioned before, the facts are not really enough. And worse, it's not just the single brain that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a socio-technical system. You're going to hear this over and over in your careers, and folks here that are slightly longer in the tooth, although everyone looks like they're younger than me, which is great. It's a socio-technical system. Whatever you're building, whatever you're producing, whatever services you're providing, it drops into a world that is complex. And I'm being scientific here. I'm not just using complex as a fancy word. If you've ever read anything about Cynefin, this is the lovely thing here. I bet you were not going to pronounce it as Cynefin, were you? No, it's a brilliant Welsh word. It took me years to figure it out. Got it wrong. I actually said it wrong to the person who created it. If you want to make friends, that's the way to do it. So Seinfin was not what he called it. Cynefin. Cynefin appreciates that when you're trying to drop, like I say, a technical product or something into the world, it's change. It's going to bring change to that world. And that world could have certain properties. And if we don't understand the properties of that world, we will fail. So what Cynefin does is it builds these 4 different worlds, 4 different general positions that a system and world can take. One, it could be basic, it could be simple, okay? Simple, you drop something in, you absolutely know it's going to work. It's a best practice, they should just do it. It's going to be brilliant, it's going to be beneficial. We often approach many different organizations and say, here's my products and services, and they're brilliant, they're going to be great for you, because we assume it's a simple environment. But it's not, because cause and effect isn't always obvious. So we move around to complicated. Complicated amps it up. Complicated cause and effect is a little harder to see. And then we move around to complex, where cause and effect is a myth. And then we go to chaotic, where there is absolutely no causes or effects anyway. Cynefin gives us some tools for approaching these environments and beginning to bring change to them. So I thoroughly recommend you read up. If you're going to read on any complexity theory in your life, Cynefin is where I would start. There's another topic called residuality, is where I go next. but I can give you some recommendations offline if you see me hanging around. Okay, so with stories, the other beauty of stories is knowing that you're doing the right thing. If you're working in a complex environment, stories give you leading indicators. You can say to people, how is this feeling to you now? Is this getting better? Are you having more experiences that you want because our product is now in place or our service is now beginning to be provided? The problem with metrics, so metrics are something that we often dive for. I mean, particularly in this data-driven age, we go for metrics. The issue with metrics is that they usually only see an effect in a complex environment way after the thing you've done, and often disconnected from it. And so it's very hard to prove that the metrics are related to what you've done. Stories are something you can get immediately. You just got to talk to people. Again, I come back to soft skills, not being soft. I spend a lot of my time talking to people, almost as much time as I do coding. Sad fact, but true. And I got into this because I was an introvert. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Okay, so how do you build stories? I want to leave you with some actions to take after this. I've stolen all of these actions from, I'll come back to that, from this. The actions I want to give you. This is not a very expensive box of cards. It's full of tips about how you can build stories. So I thoroughly recommend it. I've stolen a few from here. They're ones I used before. I didn't have any names for them. This is kind of like a list of names of things I was already doing, which is fantastic. When you're building your stories, you can be reactive, but I don't. When I'm building my stories, in my head, every day of my working life, I've been a curator of stories, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm around when someone throws a tantrum, Steve Jobs. I'm listening to what he says and how he says it and how it goes badly. And I'm racking it away. I mean, many people journal these things, which is great. I don't. I create a compost heap. It's a big list of things that just like notes. It's ridiculously ugly. Nobody I've ever tried to live with likes this thing. It's not as smelly as that, thankfully. It's a bunch of cards that look like I'm a mad, rambling sort of person. But it's full of gold. I go to my stories before I do a talk. I go, which of these shall I use? Almost before I know what I want anyone to take away, I'm starting to root through the stories I could tell. Because stories are the glue into your brain, so I need them. They're the sustenance to any talk or anything I write. So I have my compost heap, which is not usually a compost heap. Like I say, it's usually a lot of cards, and I maintain it-ish, and I try and chuck things away when I've used them, but not always. There we go. And just as a little hint, I've written a little book on how to do public speaking, and it feeds off of this. It tells you how to create a compost heap. Okay, one of the things it talks about is how I curate one and collate it. Now, you're probably all digital savvy, beautiful people, right? You've got fine, modernist homes with clean surfaces. I live in a Victorian mansion, it's not all mine, in Grassington Road, right? And it's my house is a bit like, how can I describe it? It's Gothic, it's ridiculously messy, it's wonderful. It's like some mad professor's study with books everywhere. The compost heap looks great in my place. Mine's a physical one, it's a bunch of cards. Okay, but yours will probably be something you store and rack away, and that's fine too. But creating it is gold. As you experience your careers and the days you go through, your stories are your angle. By the way, who here has trouble public speaking? Anyone? Difficulty in front of an audience, finds them a little bit daunting? I'm putting my own hand up. Okay, thing I learned about public speaking, tell your own stories. You're immediately the expert in the room. All right, if you lead with facts, everyone can dispute them. That's not what I saw. There's no one that can say, oh, that's not what I saw to one of my stories, because they're mine. So my little comfort blanket is my stories. Okay, so some questions that you'll explore at the beginning when you're creating your stories. Why do you need the story? Why do you think you're going to go into a room with people, you're planning to go and talk to them about your product or service? Why do you need this story? What are you trying to impart? What's the truth at the essence of the story? And this one's massive. There's a lovely misquoted phrase from Maya Angelou that says, people will not remember what you did. And there's another one in there, like, people will not remember what you say. They will remember how you left them feeling, how you made them feel. It's misquoted, she never said it, but it's a lovely, lovely quote. And it's true. Your products and your services will leave someone feeling a certain way, and so your stories are the vehicle for how you bring that feeling. And you can bring it in a full setting before they've even got your product or service. You can tell them how they're going to be great at it. I did it for you earlier. I tried anyway. I told you that stories were a superpower. It's not exactly a story about stories. That's meta. But it is how I want you to feel, that this is a superpower you can take away. So the tools are in this book, and I'm going to run through these because I've got 5 minutes to go. My friend here has just told me. Movie time is one of my favorites. Movie time is something I used to do on stage a lot. I would walk into a big auditorium, and I'd say, right, turn all the lights down. Everyone close their eyes. Which, by the way, immediately tests their trust in you as a speaker. All right? So I would normally promise them I'm not going to do something, anything nasty, get a selfie with them. But I would do that, and then I would tell a story. And at the end of that story, 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a talk, suddenly we all had common ground. We all felt that moment that I described. So that's movie time. You set up a literal, very clear boundary. I'm going to tell you a story now, and this is how it's going to make you feel at the end of it, because you're going to be ready for my products and services and other things later on. Why or drive always appear to people's why for doing something or using something. I used to go around and tell people they should use the Java language. I'm really sorry. If you don't like the Java language, I hear you. But I used to go around promoting it, because back then it was one of the best things that you could get. And the problem is there, I'm actually attacking someone's beliefs. If someone's put a lot of effort into learning a language, the last thing they want to hear is they need to learn another one. But I would always go in with why. What does it make me better at, and why is it going to be better for me? So as an engineer, I want to know I'm writing something that's right. That means I can go home. It means I don't have to worry about making it work on multiple devices. Java. This is the stories I used to build. Confessional, little tip. Always start a talk if you can with a confession. Not everyone loves a confession because you're giving something away that makes you look bad, and we're all a little bit like that. It's like, yeah, this is the good stuff. I used to do this all the time. So I've got a confession for you. I hate X. And by the end of the talk, I explain why I hate X. And why X, or better, why I shouldn't hate X. Because then again, you're making yourself look human. Worst thing you can do on stage is make yourself look superhuman. And that's where epic fail comes in. Explaining something that went terribly. I did that in that room with those people. I told them just how bad it had been when I'd seen, so I could build that rapport. I'd seen where they'd been. I failed too. Man in a hole is your empathy driver. I can say, here's a story about a difficulty, a situation, and it's hard and it hurts, and you start to feel for that person, and that person's you. And then here's my product that helps that person, which is you. Okay, so quick summary. Facts only go so far. There's loads more I could talk about in storytelling. Please come and grab me when you see me around the conference. I warn you, I don't look like an introvert now, but I am. So when you see me walking around and I look like I'm looking to the middle distance and I look like I'm on a mission, I'm not. I'm just doing what introverts do in a crowd, which is try desperately to ignore it. So come and talk to me, grab me. I'm very happy to have a conversation, even if I don't look like I'm happy when you interrupt me. I am, I truly am. Your products and services and the things you build in your career deserve great stories. And you can craft them. It's not that difficult. This pack of stories, really, this toolkit helps. But you'll take those stories from your own experience. And yeah, the most powerful products and services I've ever provided have always had accompanying great stories. A little bit to read, of course. One last thing. I really promise you, I'm going to get off. Okay? A warning. I mentioned earlier that there are stories that have, well, let's get there. We're trying to build rapport, trust, common ground. So this is what a story looks like to do that. However, there's the stories that don't have it. And I'm not talking about politicians. Well, I'm a little bit. But I'm talking about the temptation to build stories without truth. That's when you know you've got a shoddy product. If you can't tell the truth about it and know there's an impact and use the lie as the mechanism, then what you've got is a lie with a lie. And that will completely undermine the goal of telling a story. Okay? I took a risk earlier because I told you a lie. That undermines trust, right? But it wasn't a complete lie, so I hope you can stay with me. Because it's manipulation. And do you know what? People are smart. Now, I'm not going to point any fingers at current movements in the industry. I don't know, ChatGPT, AI. Anyway, there are things out there that are trying to tell you this will take your jobs away, right? I've been in this industry for 30 years. Every 5 years, 10 years, something's going to take my job away. All right? It was case tools back in the 90s. It was, zero code, no code solutions. And now it's AI and ChatGPT and all that good game. None of them are going to take my job away. Because I think I saw it, and I'll just give you a little phrase on this, right? Because this is how it sits when we come to the stories. All right. I had a great quote last week from one of the leading lights in our industry. And he said, "Why would I want to read any code that no one has bothered to write?" I thought that was very cool. Why would I bother to read anything that nobody's bothered to write? Okay, so with that, I will thank you for your time. I really appreciate you all. Come talk to me.
Good question, you get a book.
Yes,
So
yeah. Can we get
find a good question?
any questions? There's a few. Okay, you first, and I'm coming back to you. Okay.
Second time I've heard you speak, I think you're an inspirational person.
Thank you.
On your journey, but I really want to know what inspires you.
Easy. So the question was, what inspires me? Right, everyone back there chilling out. Just one moment. I want you to hear this, because I'm 30 years ahead of you. I mean, I've got no hair under this hat. All right, that happens to you in this industry. What inspires me as an engineer and a person in tech? Changing people's lives. I don't give a damn about technology. I don't give a damn about the process and the engineering of it, even though I'm okay at those things. I desperately care that someone is benefiting from what I'm doing. So every product I've worked on and allowed myself to work on has to be a net positive to a person's world, not a company's. I wish I cared about bottom lines and investors' money and stuff. I don't. I really care about what it's done in the world. So that's what motivates me. Cheers. Appreciate the question. Please, folks, on the right first. Sorry, mate, I can't hear you. What was the hardest truth for me to swallow? That no one knows what they're doing. The higher I got in a company, the more I realized we are still creatively winging it, and that's okay. It was scary as heck to get to that level and realize I had millions in the bank from investors. And this was in the beginning of COVID, by the way. Raising funds in the beginning of COVID was hilarious. I got a £5 million investment from several firms. So I had all this precious money they want to invest, and I had to make it up as to what we do with it. But because I'd been very fortunate to know that people like Steve were making it up as well, then you get used to that. But that was a very hard thing, because everything feels like everyone knows what they're doing in the industry, particularly people on stage. We act like we know what we're doing, that we've got it all sorted out. No, I'm still learning on a daily basis. So as a skill, learning to learn and accept the fact that no one knows what they're doing. And you can work it out. Please, my friend.
When building a story, and you said you have to add lie to the truth. How much lie would you put into a story?
Oh, that's a brilliant. Thank you. That's a brilliant question. Oh, we got some competition here, dude. So the question was, when you're wrapping a truth with some lie, how far do you go? I mean, one test is, have you cloaked the truth so much that it's unlikely to land? Is the lie distracting too much? Because there's a chance, whenever you wrap a lie around something to tell a story, you are providing distraction, potentially. And they could take something away in the lie that you don't want them to take away. So that's a steer. And I usually test these stories out against people for this, so I never go in with a story that I haven't tried somewhere. Usually against a friend of mine, usually surprising them with it because otherwise they'd avoid me. The other thing is just, it will matter for context as well. Some people will tell you need a lot of lie. They go into politics. No, I'm joking. No, we have an incredible MP right now, and I think he's very much not in this bracket. Okay? But others... Anyway, I mean, you'll get a sense for it. I tell you what works for me. I get a little sense of being fraudulent. Just a small ethical twinge that says, not only are they going to take the wrong thing away, but I'm really lying now. And that's a sensitivity. I've built that up over time. But you have to tell a lot of stories to get there. So you craft your stories as an additional skill, and you start to know when you get that sense of, And I've had it happen. I've gone out on stage and given talks. I've spoken to investors. This is a confession. I've given stories to investors and gone, have I gone too far? Is this story too big? Have I told them that the industry is this big and our product's this big and so there's so much opportunity? Is that a lie? Am I promoting too much confidence? Probably. It's one of the reasons I am no longer a CEO. I can't lie, for want of a better word, at the level that sometimes is required. And I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm just saying that sometimes it has to be like. I get why people are talking about AI as being the next thing since sliced bread. In order to justify a valuation of 8 billion, I get it. But it's a lie. I can't deliver that. Back to my reason for doing what I do. I care that people benefit, and you get that sense that your stories aren't doing that anymore. Just where I'm at. That's just my journey, though. You could be the world's best CEO, and to hell with all that, you could just run it on brilliant stories, and I'd love to see it. Right. Oh, we got time?
So he gets a book.
Oh,
Time.
oh, sorry.
We have to go to break.
Okay, what I would...
Maybe just hang around and maybe chat after.
What I will do is I'm going to give. You both work together. Are you from the same college? Can I ask you to actually it's a life lesson, right? So I share my daughter with my ex-partner. So I'm going to give you both a book, and you're going to have to figure out a way that you share it on occasion. Is that cool? Oh, you're stars. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Russ. Just to let everyone know, there's a green thank you again. Round yours.
Appreciate it.